welcome to today's webinar. We're excited to be on. Today's topic, we're going to be talking about clear communications in order to build stronger communities. We all know the challenges that we each have in our community associations. Some have more than others, but either way, getting clear communication with our residents is something that's important. And more importantly, having clear communication with the board as well. So before I introduce today's guest, I want to let everyone know on the top of your screen, you'll see the Q&A. So please feel free to ask any questions. Any questions that are related to today's topic, we'll address it. If it's not, we'll save them and see if we have another webinar that we need to host. So feel free to chime in and ask any questions, and I'll do my best to get through them and ask either Emily or answer them myself. So with further ado, I would like to introduce Emily Gannon. Emily, if you don't mind saying a little bit something about yourself and the firm you represent.
Sure. I'll talk about the firm. I feel weird talking about myself, but so my name's Emily Gannon. I've been practicing, this year's going to be 20 years, which is scary. I don't know how that happened. I've been with the firm 13 years. Kaye Rembaum is you guys have probably heard of us. This is sort of what we do, is association work. Our main office is down in Pompano. That's where I am. We have an office up in Palm Beach Gardens, an office in Orlando, and an office in Tampa. I think there's 22 attorneys now. So I like to think we're sort of the perfect size in terms of we can cover all of your needs. We have someone who probably can help you with almost anything association related, but we're not huge. So we're not one of those firms where you're going to get sort of lost in the shuffle. We pretty much all know all of our clients. My paralegal knows everybody I work with. So you get that sort of nice, small association firm feeling as well. So that's my little spiel about us.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Emily. It's always a pleasure to have you on. I know every time we host a webinar together, we get nothing but raving reviews. So thank you so much for saying yes again. And for myself, my name is Rafael Aquino. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Affinity Management Services. Similar to KBR, we are more of a medium-sized organization, really focused on helping our board members execute their vision. We do it through our proven process of align, execute, deliver. So thank you so much for attending today. Let's get started. We're really here to talk about how important it is to have effective communication and the backbone that it is for the success of any community association. So Emily, I want to start it off with you, and I know your area is really law. However, you deal with the day-to-day of these communities, and we learn throughout the day-to-day that we have to do. It's never a dull day in what we do within this industry. So the first question I wanted to ask is, when it comes to communication and, whether it be via email, whether it be in verbal, what are some of the legal responsibilities that boards have regarding the way that they communicate with either the residents or amongst themselves?
Well, and like you said, really, I'm here to kind of give us the legal perspective, but we joke that as lawyers, the other term people use for us is counselor. So that's very appropriate in this sort of field here, because it seems like sometimes I am a little bit of a therapist occasionally, even though that is not my formal training, let's be clear. But and maybe for the next panel, we probably should have a therapist or a mental health professional on here, because I know, guys, I know what we're probably going to dive into a little bit today. I know what a lot of people might have questions about, sort of how owners behave and how we can communicate effectively, but your legal requirements. So let's start simple. Your legal requirements, for the most part, you guys probably know what they are. It's sort of the basic condo, HOA, board cert 101 kind of things that you already probably know about. You know which things you have to communicate. You know that you have to notice your meetings properly. Those things need to be posted, need to be sent out. When we're talking about, membership meetings, when we're talking about special board meetings, those might be different than your usual 48-hour notice. Those types of things, those should be, sort of easy communications that everyone knows about and we're all on the same page. Again, your management team is there to help you with that, remember. So obviously, hopefully your manager also is very familiar with these things. I know the Affinity team is very familiar. But those are sort of your basic, okay, we have a meeting, we have notices, we're going to put our agenda on there. We want to make sure everybody knows sort of what's going on in the community that way, that basic legal requirement. But now when we get into sort of some other things, your legal requirements of what you need to respond to and what you need to address, there aren't many, I'm going to be honest. There's really kind of two things that you need to be aware of if you're in a condo, if you're subject to 718, Chapter 718 of Florida statutes. If you get anything that resembles a request to inspect records, you need to pay attention to that request, and then you need to address it. You need to make sure you do give them, you respond and give them the opportunity to inspect records, or you send them the records if you have them, or via email, or if they're on the website, you can direct them to your website, that kind of thing. The second thing, and that applies if you're in an HOA too, if you get a request to inspect records, you have to address that. You have to respond to that timely. Those are legal requirements. Those are legal obligations you have. The other thing that's only in 718 and it's not in 720 is a written inquiry. But I want everyone to be aware of that, because that's sort of a special thing under the statute that's only available in condo world. If you get a certified letter from an owner that asks the board questions, the board has to answer those. Now, that does not mean that every email you get under the sun you have to address, but if you get a certified letter that asks the board questions, and this is again only in condo world, not HOA world, you may have to answer those and you may have to address it. I would talk to your attorneys, send that to your attorneys. Your attorneys can probably help you in responding appropriately. But those are the only things you really need to address that you have a legal obligation under the statute to communicate, so to speak.
Of course. Yeah, and as you brought up the whole difference between condo and HOA, many boards get confused. There's different requirements for each one. But again, it just goes to kind of lean into the importance of really speaking with your advisors, whether it be your attorney or management company, or in many cases, both.
Right.
At the same time. I know I can tell you, especially in the condo space, you see an increase in now records requests, especially as maintenance fees have gone up for some associations, 10%, for some associations, 100+%, depending on where they stood with their reserves and so forth. And that has created an array of questions of what's going on, why is this happening? So that's kind of why we wanted to do this webinar, especially for the condos as well as the HOAs, the importance of, residents shouldn't be surprised whenever, something of that nature is going to occur. Like, there should be good communication that's going on. And I know the statute has gotten stricter when it comes to, the records request and being able to provide it. As I'm sure you've seen, our legislators have been receiving a lot of feedback from either residents or, situation that we had down in Miami-Dade County. It becomes very important to have the information at hand. So I want to ask this question, because we were talking a little bit about before the webinar how you've seen changes in management and different things.
Yeah.
How important is it, during, let's say, the transition of obtaining the necessary information, whether it be those required statute documents like minutes and so forth? How important is it? And then what do you do if you're unable to obtain that information during the transition from either one company to another, or from self-managed to a company, or whatever the scenario may be?
Well, interesting, because it's not easy. We see it all the time where a transition happens and you just get the answer, we don't have these records, we don't know what happened to them. Prior management says they sent them, but we don't have them. Or, they said they put them on a thumb drive. We don't have, the thumb drive doesn't have that, something along those lines. Correct. Now, again, you want to get your attorneys involved, because maybe there was a simple oversight. Maybe the thumb drive got corrupted, whatever it was. But sometimes maybe the management team didn't realize they didn't upload everything to the thumb drive, and it's an easy fix. Let's hope, fingers crossed, that's all it is. But sometimes records do get lost. Sometimes it's like you said, sometimes people are self-managed, and then the board, the former board treasurer or whoever it is moves back to Canada, and we don't know what happened to those records, and we can't find them anymore. Now there's an obligation in Chapter 718. In addition to maintaining your records, there's an obligation to, keep them organized. So that's another sort of, I don't want to say burden, but burden on the association. And if you can't find records, there's an obligation now to recreate them to your best ability, to try to find them. So you can't just say anymore, you know, oh, well, Bob moved back to Canada. We don't know what happened to those records. He used to keep everything in his, unit, and we don't have them anymore. Well, now you got to really take those extra steps. Does somebody have Bob's phone number? Can we send him a letter? Can we reach out to him? Can we get these things sent to us? Can we get everything scanned, sent on a thumb drive, something? You really have to make the effort to get these records and make sure you do have them. Again, when we're talking management companies, it's a little bit easier because hopefully, again, everyone's being professional and will listen. There are obligations, and I'm sure I'm sure your managers know they are obligated to turn those records over. Statute requires it. CAMs are licensed, guys, so they have to follow some rules or they could get in trouble. So, I know you guys have a good policy. I've never had issues with, transitioning from Affinity to Affinity with records, but there are other companies where that becomes a problem. But you may need to get your attorneys involved. And like I said, if it's an issue of self-managed, you may have to recreate some records if you can. But you can't just say, well, we don't know what happened to them. Do a little digging, do a little investigating, try to find them. Now there is that obligation now if you're in 718 world.
Correct. Yeah. And it's important to highlight that because, sometimes they don't want to make the change because of the lack of, oh, we don't have this, they're not going to get it. That's the reason why you should be making a change. And the right thing to do is at least what we try to do here with all our clients is if you don't receive something, it's just let the attorney know so that there could be a release saying, listen, these are the documentation we didn't receive from the prior management company. And then what steps you need to take. So if you're going to need to recreate, that's a project now that you're going to have to take on. You can't just say, oh, well, it's the current management company's problem. No, that's a project you're going to have to take on because the management company wasn't there during that time. Additionally, do you have that information now currently on your association website? Because if you don't, that could be a challenge. Now there's unit restrictions, unit minimums, but either way, if it doesn't matter what size you are, I highly recommend, having that information accessible because not only makes your life easier as a board member, but also those records requests kind of tying that back. It helps you significantly if you have that information and just direct someone to the website. Just go to the website. The information's there. You'll be able to capture whatever you need.
Right. That does make life easier. I know the whole project of kind of ramping up and getting everything on the website is time consuming and probably expensive, and it's a bit of a pain. I understand, but once you do it, it's going to make your life easier. Hopefully,
much easier. Definitely. Yeah. So let's switch gears a little bit. I know we've had many questions that have to do in the past of, well, how should the board communicate? Should it be email? Should it be the association's website? Should it be the newsletter? Should it be all? And then the infamous WhatsApp chat that get created. So let's start with the chat, right? Because I know we get that question asked many times of how to handle it. I wanted to get your perspective first of what I would say would be your best practice when it comes to these community chats and should board members be on it and what they should do on these chats.
I know it's funny that now this technology has kind of somehow made our lives a little bit more difficult somehow.
That's right. That's right.
Interesting because you have to be careful is the bottom line. I don't think that there should be sort of an association sanctioned WhatsApp chat. But now if some of your owners ultimately get each other's phone numbers and they start talking and then it kind of builds into almost every owner is on this same chat, that's fine. But you want to make sure there's a delineation of this is not an association, sanctioned method of communication. The messages you see on here are not coming from the board. They're not coming from management. It's another owner who's, maybe complaining or sharing information. It can go either way. It could be good or bad. And that works with Facebook groups too. All of those things you want to make sure we're clearly, outlining what messaging is coming from the association and then what messaging and the board and management, and then what messaging might just be coming from a disgruntled owner or again, another owner, maybe a former board member who's not a fan of the current board. All of that you have to take into consideration. So when we have, boards that do this type of thing, we tell them, let's be very careful. There should not really be a board WhatsApp, I don't think personally. I think they really, again, if there's an owner one that's been started and you're on the board and you're an owner and you're kind of in it because you want to keep an eye on what's going on, I don't have a problem with that. I would be very careful cautioning that board member before they say anything on that chat. Because again, when you are a board member now, keep in mind, everything you say, people are going to interpret as being said on behalf of the board, even when it's not necessarily. So for you guys, I know we always say, be very careful, be very clear about who is authorized sort of to speak on behalf of the board. And when you are speaking on behalf of the board, make that clear versus you're speaking, your own perspective, your own, as an owner, opinion. That's different than I'm speaking as the president or I'm speaking as the secretary. And we want to make sure that's very clear so that there's no confusion there. For you guys, I'm sure, the way our firm works, generally we ask boards right away when an association signs up with us, tell us who your authorized contact is going to be. It doesn't have to just be one, it could be two people. Maybe it's the president and the treasurer, because maybe we have some collections and the treasurer would make sense to talk to our collections team. But we want to know who our point person is going to be, who's going to be authorized to give us instructions, because we don't, we have some boards that have 15 board members. You don't want, and for our purposes, we don't want 15 people calling and asking the exact same question. And then we bill the client 15 times for the exact same information. That seems a little silly. But for your purposes and for sort of communicating with the owners, it's a similar thing. You want to make sure we are streamlining and somebody is actually the authorized person. I'm sure you guys have that too, right? You only really want to speak to kind of one or two board members just to keep everything, again, streamlined and efficient and
Yeah.
right?
And the same, 100%, Emily. It's similar process. It's actually within our agreement as well. It's just so that one or two. Reason being is it becomes very difficult when you're being pulled in different directions. So,
right.
And in reality, the way we see it is it creates unity amongst the board because, hey, you should agree on what direction you want to take. You don't all have to agree. I say that many times to the boards. It doesn't have to be, every decision does not need to be unanimous. Just like in business, some may make good decisions, some may make bad, but that's part of the process. But ultimately, we want to be able to speak to one or two individuals because it just makes the communication channels much cleaner, and as well as it gives us a clear vision of what we need to do and how we need to do it.
Right.
And I'm very glad you brought up about the chat because we take a similar position, right? I think as a resident, it's important that you're on the chat. So if you're if you're a board, I would say be on the chat. Get ready to take some heat because it will happen. But ultimately, the channel should be just to be able to listen and to understand what's going on with the community. And then you decide what channel as a board is yours. Is it email? Is it email and newsletter? Is it the website? Because the minute you start getting into the conversations there, what we have found is the boards that maybe don't take our advice, it just becomes a back and forth. And many of the times, the issue is with that 1% or those 2 or 3 homeowners that are always causing issues, and just using that as an opportunity to negate all the positive work that board members really do. So I think it's an opportunity for you to listen and understand what your community is saying. I don't think you should ignore it. But as Emily stated, I would steer clearly away from responding in association-related matters in there. And then, maybe using it to push, look, these complaints, send them to the work order system or go to the website for these complaints. We have a meeting on this date. If you want to address it, but really stay away from providing potential, addressing individual residents' issues, because they should be going through the channels that exist for your community. No different that if you go change your iPhone, you don't just call the CEO of the company or the COO of the company and say, change my phone. What's going on? No, you need to go through the channels that are created for that business so that they can track it. They can understand if the team is responding when they need to respond. And that way, if there is a records request or any of that information, you can easily have it. If should there be a legal obligation or some kind of challenge that you need to provide evidence, you can't provide the evidence through a WhatsApp chat. Again, there's many pros and cons to it. I would use it as an opportunity to really listen. And then that way you can go through your channel to to provide the feedback that's necessary, if it's even necessary, because many times it's just people ranting about things that only that the issue only pertains to them and not to the community
Right.
as a whole.
And that really, you guys also, you do have to be selective about what you kind of pay attention to. And I,
Yeah,
like you said, don't ignore it, but keep in mind, hey, that one neighbor who's complaining about his next door neighbor who parks on the grass all the time, or plays music too loud. Okay, well, if multiple people are complaining, again, maybe this is something that's a violation, then attention should be given to, that should be sent to management's attention, and maybe a violation notice is appropriate. But it could just be somebody complaining about their neighbor because they don't like their neighbor,
yeah,
and so that's not necessarily a board issue or an association issue. And we want to be very clear about those things, because when those those lines get blurred, it gets a little messy. If a board member, again, is participating and contributing and communicating, we want to make sure it's very clear if they're communicating on behalf of the board and on behalf of the association, or if they're just giving their personal 2 cents. And when you're
yeah,
on the board, that's a fine line. You want to make sure, wait a minute, should I be weighing in on this? Should I be speaking about it? Or is it something that I should just bring to management's attention or bring to the rest of the board's attention, and we'll address it at the next meeting or something like that? But, really make sure your owners know that the chat is not official,
right,
association business, that, you're
right.
going to get your real information at the board meetings. You're going to get your communication from the notices that are sent out or the email blasts that are sent out from the board, from management, and make
Right.
sure that's very clear.
Right. Yeah, we've used it in a way to help silence those chats too, as if hopefully the association has a weekly newsletter.
Right.
What I've experienced is that many residents don't understand what happens in the back office of everything that's going on with the community. And I get it. We're in an era of, the Amazon effect, where you're used to pressing a button and you have something either the next morning or within 2 days you have something. And and with certain instances, those things can happen in associations. But unfortunately, and many times there may be backed up work orders because the association's budget has remained the same, or it's only gone up 2 to 3%. The community's
Yeah.
aging. So in order to get work orders done at a higher speed, you may need to either add an additional person or whatever may be. So as a board, if you're in that situation, what I recommend is in your weekly newsletter, just say, okay, we've closed out 15 work orders. We have 30 that we're working on. So at least the residents can see progress. And then if at a board meeting, you can start to express, if you have this data, you can start to explain to them, listen, we have 150 work orders. We only have one maintenance guy. We
Right.
can speed up the work orders. However, it's going to cost the association 55, 60, whatever that number is everyone willing, as a board, have that decision? You can make that decision and decide, do we amend the budget? Do we do this? Do a survey with the residents? We're backed up with 190 work orders. We're considering adding a person. Is this something that the community would entertain? And you could do a survey and get the interaction. That way, what you're doing is you're communicating of why there are delays, and you're expressing why the delay does exist and the
Right.
potential solve for it. So at least you're giving them a solve. If the residents take the survey and a majority say no, you can still make the decision to do it, because as a board, you have the right to do that. But you can at least have some facts and say, look, this is, we're backed up on work orders. We did a survey. So right now what we're going to do is expect 2 weeks for work orders to be completed, or whatever that timeline is. And that way everyone understands the expectation. So, there's
And
always
that's a good
solve.
suggestion. I was going to say,
Yeah.
straw polls, surveys, those are great tools too. Now, again, they're nothing official. It doesn't mean, like you
Right.
said, if everybody comes back and says, absolutely not, we don't want to spend more money on maintenance. Well, the board may still say, no, we really think we need to spend more money on maintenance
That's right.
because this is getting, too backed up. And now
Too
we
backed up,
again
right.
have a duty to make sure the building's being properly maintained here. So, there is a balance, but those surveys, those straw polls, then people feel heard, they feel like they're involved. That's really the big thing we see. The sort of the pattern is the owners want to feel like they have a say. They want to know that, they want to feel like there's transparency. They want to know that their voice matters, that they're being heard, that they're involved. Now, again, as a practical matter, legally, your owners don't get to vote on all that much. They really don't.
That's right. That's right.
So if you can get them involved sort of at the smaller, lower level, which isn't, again, necessarily legally required, but
Right.
more so just so they can feel like they're being, their input is actually being respected. Great. Then maybe your owners will stop complaining so much, and
That's
then
right.
and it kind of makes everybody feel a little better. Oh, well, that's the issue because we didn't realize that the maintenance guy is only here 3 days a week and
That's
whatever
right.
else. But if we pay more, maybe we do want him to come 5 days a week. Okay, I'd be willing to pay an extra $10 a month.
That's
Okay.
right.
You never know.
Exactly.
Your owners might
You
be
never
okay
know.
with the answer. We've had
That you're
owners,
completely
suggest solutions, and then as soon as the board says, that's great, but here's what it would cost, immediately then the owners say, oh, we don't want that anymore, never mind.
that's exactly right. That's exactly right. Many times the board, and listen, they're always doing it with good intentions. Many
Yes,
times it's with
yes.
good intentions, but they lose sight that maybe the owners are okay with paying $5
Right.
more
Maybe
to
they
get
are.
work orders from 2 weeks down to 1 week, because that makes them feel happy. So you're completely right.
And
That's
it
why I
can go
think
the
those
other
surveys
way.
are so
I've
important.
had I've
Yeah,
had,
yeah, it could.
owners who will say, hey, can't we get, a rover for our HOA? Can we get another guard? Can we do, 24-hour circulating security because, some kids broke into someone's car? Okay, well, it happened because it was kids in the community, but all right, maybe let's look into having that extra guard or whatever it is. And then you look into it and you realize, well, wait a minute, it's a whole new salary, more insurance, more this, more that. Okay, guys, we looked into it. It would cost X dollars more to the
Excellent.
budget. If everyone's willing to do that, we'll do it. And I've literally had the same owner who said, why don't we get that guard say, oh, never mind.
Yeah.
Never mind, it's okay.
Of course, of course. I want to address two questions we have here. I have a question from Sam Cohen. Sam Cohen asked, our agendas are posted, but recently were posted and added to Vanica, which is a software, because of a very recent controversial issue. Did this set a precedence for the future?
So
I guess in simple terms, what he's saying is that they recently added it to like a portal or to their new to a system. Did this now set a precedence that they need to send these agendas in this fashion or put them on that system in that fashion every time?
Well, interesting, because we touched on websites a little bit, and we can sort of touch on it a little bit more. If you are in an HOA that has 100 or more lots, you're supposed to already have a website up and running. It was January of this year. If you are in a condo, now as of next year, they've reduced the number. So next year, January, if you're 25 more or you're 25 or more units. So to me, that's almost every condo is by next January is going to have a website. HOAs, again, you have a little leeway because 150, that's not necessarily everybody. I get it. But for the most part, you probably have to have a website now. If you don't, if you're not legally required to have a website, then those standards don't necessarily apply to you in terms of what needs to be posted and all of that. But if you have a website anyway, my 2 cents would be, and again, all of this today, by the way, is really just guidance and not actual legal advice, just educational discussion, guys. A quick disclaimer there. But my 2 cents would be if you are maintaining a website, then you should try and you might as well kind of try to comply with what the website requirements are under the statute. So why not post the notice on the website? Again, you're not trying to hide anything from your owners. So go ahead, post the notice on there with the agenda. Because as you said, a lot of what's going on in the last couple of years, budgets are going up for various reasons, because insurance costs went up, because of milestone, because of SIRS, because of everything else going on in the world. Last couple of years, budgets have gone up. Now that has meant lots of special assessments, lots of loans being taken out to fund these projects, and then special assessments to repay those loans. So when you're just sort of surprising your owners with a big special assessment, and some of these are big numbers, guys, your owners, wait a minute, what's going on? That's where you really shock people. But if you've been telling them all along, hey guys, here's what we're planning to do. We're going to have to do concrete restoration. Hey, we'll have the engineer come out and tell you what's going on. We know that it's going to cost this much money. We're estimating it's going to be this much, blah, 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 blah. If there's a little bit, of communication in advance, then when you post that notice for that special assessment meeting with a very big number, you're not going to have that same reaction of everybody going, whoa, 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 what just happened? Where'd this come from? So that's what we're trying to avoid. So when you do the notices and all of that, nothing that's on there should really be a big shock to anybody. And again, we're not hiding anything. So when you post it, we want owners to know, we want them to come out, we want them to be heard. So if they want to know about the special assessment, if that's what the notice is, talking about, then come out to the meeting and hear why we need it. And so, yeah, if you have a website, I would say put it on there. Why not?
Yeah, I agree. Those are excellent points. And what I want to add to that, Emily, and to Sam directly is, if you already have your board meetings already set up, ideally, in ideal circumstance, you already have your board meeting pre-scheduled for the whole year. Because again, you're dealing with 3 to maybe 19, as Emily mentioned. I know we have a client that has 15 board members. You already have that pre-scheduled. So yes, if you could post it on the website, or if you use Vanica, whatever it is on the portal, I don't think you're setting a negative precedent. I think what you're doing as a board is you're communicating of what is going on within your community association. And also what you're creating, in my opinion, is you're creating a pattern of where they can go to get this information. So Cheryl asked a question of, should we post that they post the minutes on the website, but someone's asking to have them emailed every month? And that's probably a couple people that are asking to email it. And what I would recommend, Cheryl, is I would say just place them where you believe, where statute requires. If they're on the website or on the portal, because it could be either or, then you're compliant. Because what's then to say that you email the minutes to everybody, then what's to say, okay, email every proposal? Okay, email everything of this. No, you want to create where your pattern is for the residents to obtain the information that's necessary for your community. So if it's your website, which hopefully it is, then residents know, okay, I want to get minutes, I go to the website. What you could do with your system, if you have automation, just so you don't add more work to your manager, is if anytime you upload a minutes, for instance, in our system, it could send an automatic email letting the resident know something new has been uploaded to the portal. So that way they know, okay, something new, let me go see what that something new was.
So your system does do that?
Yeah, it allows
that's nice.
for that. Yeah, so that way they know where to go to capture the information or obtain the information for the community. Because if you just start emailing, then they're going to think, okay, everything gets emailed, so I don't need to go anywhere. Then they lose the pattern of, where do I go check my balance? They call your office. That takes time from your staff. So again, in the world of community association, finally our space has started to speed up on automation, on technology. I would say ever since COVID hit, our industry has sped up. But you need to start creating these patterns so that residents know where to go, because every time a team member at the office or a team member on the phone is interrupted, that's time they're taking away from addressing the work order issue that we were talking a few seconds ago. So again, wherever you can, you want to be able to automate and create that pattern so that residents know where they can obtain the information.
And it is a balance. I get where, maybe the owner or whoever it is like, well, what's the problem? Just shoot me an email. It's quick, takes 2 seconds. Okay, but now what if other owners want, okay, can I have the minutes? Can you also send me, like you said, will you also just email me a copy of my ledger every month instead of the regular way? It just sort of now starts to clog up your system here, and you can't be as efficient and as effective. And then your manager is dealing with sort of all of these special, instances and special requests. And now everybody has a special request, and now your manager can't get anything done. So, you have to make sure you really are balancing all of these things out. Do I think that's an unreasonable request for the person to say, hey, can you email them to me? No, but I don't think responding with, well, they're posted every month. You can just look every month, they're posted 2 days after or whatever it is, just check the website. I think that's a perfectly legitimate response.
Yeah. Yep. Again, kind of using the analogy, what my business partner and I always talk about is our industry is very special. And in the sense of sometimes we're asked to change our operation.
Yeah.
And associations need to understand that you're hiring a managing company, you're hiring them because of their systems, the people, the way that they do business. You get along with them. Normally you do business with people you get along with. So if we're making recommendations, let's go with the recommendations, because we have many communities that we serve. Because as soon as you start changing certain processes for just 1 or 2 individuals, that starts to create clogs into the wheel that's already the well-oiled machine that you're building. And then it just creates more challenges. And then why did this happen? And why did that happen? Well, because we're having to make a special exception for one individual. And now we're going to have to make another exception for another individual. And the process gets all gets all changed.
Yep. Yep.
So since we're on the topic of communication, I know we've done it with some of our clients, but I'd love for you to touch on a little bit, Emily, on how important is it for the board to have a written communication, let's say policy,
Right.
or a policy, a code of ethics. I know we have some of our clients that have a code of ethics. One of my clients even has their own Bill of Rights. So talk to me a little bit about what you recommend and how you could support the associations in doing this.
Well, and it's on two fronts, I would sort of say. Now, when we talk about policies and proper kind of behavior, which again is a lot of, it's very funny that this is now something we have to talk about, but we have to talk about it. For your owners, for meeting behavior, generally you should have a policy in place, and we can help you draft something where to just have your meetings run smoothly, how you're going to do it, how long each person's going to have to speak, how questions are going to be handled, and then part of that is also how those owners are going to be behaving in the meetings. They can ask a question, but they can't just start screaming at your board members and cursing at them and, alleging that they've stolen money and all of that. That's not the same thing as participating in a meeting effectively. So, we really should have policies like that already set up, where you can tell an owner, okay, this is your first warning, that behavior is not appropriate. And if it happens again, you're going to be asked to leave. And then get to a point where potentially you have to ask them to leave. You may even have to call a police officer or shut down the meeting if it gets to, that level. And then you do want your attorneys involved at that point to maybe send that person a cease and desist type letter. But even as board members, you need to kind of be on your best behavior. You do have a fiduciary duty. You are supposed to be acting in the interest of the association, not your own personal interest. So, there's a little bit of tough skin you might have to develop, because you are going to have people potentially calling you a liar, calling you a thief, something like that. And again, that's not okay, but that doesn't mean you can react sort of in kind. You also, as a board member, should be acting in a respectful, professional, courteous manner. You should not be cursing at other owners. You shouldn't be cursing at other board members. And we've seen that when boards get really heated on a topic and they're sort of split on something, and I want to do it this way, I want to do it this way. Well, you're a jerk and you don't know what you're talking about. But we see these board meetings where things just sort of spiral out of control.
Yeah.
Like you said, a code of conduct, maybe some sort of, now again, you can have this in place where your board members are going to sort of sign off when they become board members, when they're elected or appointed or whatever it is. Realistically, I'll tell you, you can't make it a requirement in terms of, hey, if you don't sign this piece of paper, you're not going to be on the board.
That's right.
But again, you can have a policy in place just the same way we would with an owner who's not behaving. You can have the same policy for a board member who's not behaving, that you may have to send them a letter. You may have to, ask them to leave a meeting if they're not behaving, on their best behavior. I would hope that we wouldn't get to that point, and I would hope that everybody would agree to follow these policies and basically, again, behave like adults. But again, we see sometimes things get heated, and you're talking about communities where there's a lot of money being discussed, a lot of money that's coming out of individual, homeowners' pockets, and they're looking at their neighbors, and you guys live together, and the tension, it's just fraught with potential conflict. These aren't objective, just businessmen who are talking about money. It's money coming out of their own pockets, and they're talking to their neighbors. So you guys live together. You live on top of each other potentially. So, the room for tension there really, really can it can explode. So we want everyone to behave. We want you to have, it would be nice to have a policy in place that every board member is going to behave, how we're going to behave at meetings. And if people don't follow it, then you have to proceed and actually enforce these things too. Send letters, get your attorneys involved.
Agreed.
People can't be yelling at your manager. We have that too.
Right.
I don't know if your team.
That never happens.
Never happens. Where someone comes in and screams at the manager every day and starts throwing things in the office. No, that's not appropriate behavior.
That's right.
And you shouldn't be doing that to your, aside from the owner who is doing that shouldn't be doing that. As board members, you can't allow that for your manager. That's not okay. So you do have to act, and you do have to, keep everyone on their best behavior.
That's completely right. And I appreciate you bringing that up because that's such an important key. Ultimately, when you have vendors working together, you're partners in one way or another. Right. Even if at moments in every relationship, there's ups and downs. In any marriage, there's ups and downs. Even in the downs, you need to respect each other, and just be clear, right? Just be clear. Look, this is where we're falling short. This is where you're falling short. Just be clear and work through it. But ultimately, that level of respect and support needs to be had for all parties. So the same thing goes that management needs to respect its board, just like the board should respect management, and the residents should also respect both of those parties as well. So you need to be really clear, again, sticking to the topic of communication, of what's working and what's not working. And ultimately, Stephen Covey has a great quote that I wrote down, is seek first to understand, then to be understood. And that really speaks a lot to just listen, because many times when the residents come in and they're addressing an issue with the board or with the manager, many times the issue is really not that issue. There's something underlying underneath that. If it's something personal that they're dealing with and they're taking it out on you another way, or the issue is something deeper that maybe the issue has been going on for 10 years or 5 years, whatever it may be. So as a leader, whether you're management, board, or a partner, or a vendor, it's important first that you listen, understand where they're coming from, empathize, and then address it in a calm fashion, whether you can and be clear. Don't be vague. It's better for you to be clear and say you can't do it at this time than be vague, because that's where the expectations, the false expectations, I should say, are created, and they leave thinking that something's going to get done, and the issue then comes back into something else that it really should not be.
And there is a nice way to sort of, kind of, I don't want to say reject someone, but there is sort of a nice way to hear the input of an owner without necessarily agreeing to, okay, now we're going to go ahead and hire that extra security guard or whatever it is. You can take the information, you can accept it, and let them know, okay, we've heard you and we're going to consider this. As opposed to just shutting it down right away. And maybe they do have sort of an outlandish suggestion or want to bring up something that maybe isn't on the agenda. If you initially just, like you said, listen first. If you just snap at them, hey, Bob, we're not talking about that today. Forget it. Now, what kind of sort of energy, what do you expect when that's how you respond? As a board member, there's a different way to say, oh, Bob, thanks so much for bringing that up. Something we're going to talk about next week, actually. Can you hold off and we'll get to it? That's very different than, hey, that's not on the agenda today. Everyone, forget what he's talking about. He's crazy. Different ways to handle it. Same effect, but
Well, for those legislators that are listening, or I know you guys teach your courses, it'd be great to, within the 4 or 8 hour course, depending on the size of the community, obviously, that we give a little training on conflict resolution. I think it would help all of us. And that would probably be a 4 hour course on its own, but either way. I want to address Donna's question here. And Donna asked, what are the thoughts on using voice message for general messaging and reminders to residents? So she says she knows text messaging requires an opt-in, and you're completely right on that. I would say, it all depends on the cost, right? Because there are costs to do those robo voicemails or those robo calls. I could speak for us of where we use it. We use it more for hurricane, in those major emergencies.
Real emergencies. I was going to say, I don't know too many that really use it, but the emergencies make sense.
Yeah, we use it, I would say, only really for hurricane, when the hurricane is getting into very close, and we'll just as quick reminders. But if you can afford it, remember, you're now creating also a pattern. So is that the way you want to communicate? Because then when you send the message, you need to be prepared for them to call you back. So you have to always think of not just the initial result that you're looking for, but what impact is that result? What other issue is that result going to create for you? So if you just want to communicate, that may not be the ultimate goal, because they may call you back, and then can you handle the bandwidth of those calls? Because normally when you do those robocalls, they're all done at one time. So that's important to keep top of mind. But again, I appreciate the thought process, because you're looking to do a better job of communicating with your residents. We're just trying to give you some pro tips And some may be good and some may not be as good.
And I'll reiterate too. I mean, we're talking about sort of technology and the steps that people have made and the advances and the new modern ways of communicating. I'm gonna throw it back here and be a little old school. Sending actual mail is actually
Yeah.
very effective too.
Yeah.
It may sound silly, but if
No,
you
not at
really
all.
do have something important to communicate, maybe it's an amendment that you may have to mail it anyway, but if there's something going on, a proposed amendment, again, maybe a big project that you just want to let people know this is going to be happening, maybe send it, do your email blast, do your postings, but maybe send something in the actual mail too.
Yep.
Sometimes if that is only done occasionally, that maybe that will get your owner's attention if that's something you want them to, pay attention to.
Yep, that's correct. I mean, obviously AI, everything else that's going on, we won't go there because that's a whole nother webinar of its own. But yeah, not all residents. Like we have the data. We have probably about
Right.
85% of our residents that we have email. Some just they don't have email. So it's just we're still going through a generational change, and that's part of the process. So you want to make sure that you're communicating to those. So if it's something big like a special
Right.
assessment, a major impact to the budget, yeah, I think Emily's recommendation is on point of emailing it and also mailing it. And remember, you could be creative in your mailing. You could send a postcard and say, we have it
Right.
printed at the office. You could be creative because the
Right.
cost of mailing has gone up. Postage recently went up again, and so forth. But either way, you have to keep that in mind, understanding what the culture of your community is, what's the demographics of your community.
Right.
And if you have this data, okay, how many people do we have emails for? And you can start to make better decisions because ultimately that's what you are in your community is the leader. So you need to have these data points so that you could make better decisions for your community as a whole. And for
Yeah.
what it's worth, CAI, Community Association Institute, does have a code of conduct.
Yes.
It's a template. I would highly recommend you have it reviewed by your attorney. And I'm happy to share that. So just reach out to our team and I'm happy to share that document. And it just tells you a little bit of how the
I
board
think
should
it's a
be
good
conducting
basic.
itself.
Yeah, I've
Yep.
seen it. It's
Yeah,
it's a
it's
good
really
sort of.
basic, but it's a good way to
Yeah,
start off,
it's a
right?
good start. And really,
Yeah.
when we're talking about something you should be aware of and you should understand as a board member, that captures the
Yeah, the
basics. So
essence
it's
of it.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's,
Yeah.
that's the hardest part is we're managing so many different personalities. But people get frustrated and people are people. You're not going to change them. They are who they
Right.
are. But at least if you're setting a tone of, look, as a board, this is the way we want things done. This is the way we should conduct ourselves. Then at least set some guardrails, right? There are always people that are going to go push through those guardrails.
Right.
But at least it starts to set a
And
tone.
the other thing to keep in mind too, in addition to actual, sort of behavior, when you have the owners, and it is usually a very small group that are, causing the chaos at board meetings or posting on WhatsApp and Facebook groups and all of that and complaining about the board and I think the board is the worst and they're making terrible decisions and why are we doing this project when we could get a cheaper roofer, whatever they might be coming up with and sort of doing. Usually what we found is those very loud people, there's only a small group of them.
That's right.
And the majority of your community is probably very happy with what you're doing as a board.
That's right.
So, that small group, there's another sort of tip that, you don't want to sort of add oxygen to that fire, so to speak. A lot of what they may say or they may claim, you don't need to address. You don't need to get into sort of the mud with them, so to speak. We don't, what is it? We don't want to go low, we stay high,
We say
whatever it
hi.
is. You can instead, send out if they're talking about whatever it is, this big project you guys have going on, the roof or the concrete restoration, and they think there's, what's wrong with the contractor? Why is it taking so long? It's costing us more money. The board must have done something wrong. We hear a lot of kind of that where we're throwing out kind of rumors and allegations of that nature. Don't address that person. Don't address those posts. Instead, maybe send a memo, send an email out to everyone. Hey guys, we just want to give you an update on what's going on with the project and explain why it was a little delayed or what's going on. Actually, our contractors had great luck. The permits came in quickly, whatever it is. Promote sort of the positive stuff. Tell everyone the good things about what's going on so that that negative, little loud voice gets drowned out by all of the good news. Tell your owners, hey, here, we're on budget actually. Here's what's really happening behind the scenes. Maybe you guys didn't realize the permits took so long because whatever, City of Pompano is great with permits. You know, but we're actually catching up and we're going to be on board, you know, whatever it is. Let your owners know so that those negative Nelly voices get drowned out without directly addressing the negative Nelly. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
100%, 100%. Jeff mentions here from your team about how terrible it is for social media, and I couldn't agree more, because they grab screenshots, post it, start putting dirty laundry out there. And ultimately, you know, the goal is you're in a community to create a sense of community. And that's where I kind of want to shift the conversation a bit is, you know, if you want to start getting this positive and start, you know, positive outlook and getting the residents really engaged, it's equally as important to start, you know, small events. And many times boards feel that it's too expensive to do a holiday event. You know, we've had some of our managers do simple things like paint the turkey hen, and they went to the dollar store, bought 30 of those. They got 20 kids showed up, and it started to create momentum. And then residents really started to get a better experience of the community. They started to understand because the manager's there or the board is there. Start understanding, having nice conversations of what's working, what's not working. The residents start to get engaged. So it's important to, you know, try to host a community event, one or two, and that way you can get sponsorships from the management company or from the vendors and so forth. Have them help you, maybe support you in putting together that event. And that way the residents start to get engaged. And you'll quickly realize, like Emily said, that it's just a small few that are creating the fuss and the issues. And once you engage those that are in part on your side, are really happy of being in the community, then they'll start to help you silence those. They're like, listen, we've gone to all these events. We have food truck events in our communities, the HOAs that are like 600, 700 units. We always hit the minimum that they require, so the association doesn't pay anything. Food truck shows up, hey, everyone, there's a food truck, come, and the residents come together, kids play, and it costs the association nothing but the manager's time or the assistant manager's time to put it together, put the flyer together, and get the residents to come out. And that creates the engagement of why people move into community associations. You know, I belong to COMC, so it's a group, right, of management company owners, and they did a study, just like CAI did as well, and the data was very similar, and that almost, I think it was 80+% of residents are happy of living within a community association. The problem is that we get drowned with what the media tells us, we get drowned with those one or two residents. So it's important not to get lost in that noise if you're a leader of your community, and really focus on, okay, how can I start to create more engagement? You start small and you'll see that that'll start to compound over each time you do an event with the community, because you can engage them even with a survey. What were your thoughts of that event? What other events would you like to see? Do we have any volunteers that would help put it together? And so forth. So there's so much that you could do to really turn the community around and give it more of a positive feel.
And it's nice, like you said, because you want to work with people you like, basically, and that you get along with. So it's nice when, as an owner, you know, you can meet the manager, and it's not just because I had to go to the office to complain that my transponder wasn't working. You know, it's nice when you can actually just talk to them for a few minutes and get to know them and whatever, and your fellow board members, because you might not know who your board members are. You might not know everybody on the board. And it's nice to just chit chat and get to know them without, again, same thing, going just to complain, hey, the gate broke again, you know. Okay.
Correct. And then now that we're getting, I mean, I know people are going to think it's crazy, but we are walking already into, we're in hurricane season, now we're walking into budget season. So
I can't believe we're already there.
Our time starts to get, I know it's here. So it's important that if you know, right, by now you should be looking at your financials. You're 6 months in, you're going to get your 6-month financial by July. You should know where you're at with your budget. If you're looking to have an increase, start hosting the town hall, start communicating, again, kind of sticking to the topic, start communicating. Make sure you're communicating on the hurricane topic as well. What are going to be the plans? If you're in a tower and you're in an evacuation zone, make sure you're communicating that. Listen, you're going to need to evacuate. This is what the county or the city, depending where you're located, requires. If you're an HOA, we're leaving the gate things up. So people are going to come in and out. What are the requirements? Does your community flood? Start communicating these things now. And that way your residents are not surprised, even though they will act surprised. But at least you know you can put your head on the pillow saying, okay, I did my part as a leader of my community. and your board sees your actions, and they'll give you that pat in the back for the hard work that you've put into it. But
yeah,
we're coming up at the end of the webinar. So Emily, any one or two golden nuggets, or how our listeners can reach you if they'd love for you to put together a policy, or any other topics that they'd like to reach you for?
Other little tips that we didn't get into too much, but keep in mind attorney-client privilege whenever you're communicating with your owners. If the board has discussed something with the attorney, then don't at the meeting say, the attorney said we could do this, because now you've sort of opened that door of attorney-client privilege. There's a different way to say, well, we've spoken to counsel, we're still going to proceed, whatever, without directly saying, our attorney said this. Please don't do that. Don't do that. If you have any questions, again, about what's attorney-client privilege, talk to your attorneys and get that straightened out. Basically, the way you can reach me, I think you guys will all have my email, but it's just egannon@kbrlegal.com. You can go to our website. It's kbrlegal.com. We have lots of classes, seminars, YouTube videos posted there, articles, things you can look into. Another thing to keep in mind, and I'm gonna tell on myself here. I watch a lot of Bravo. I watch a lot of Housewives. And occasionally there is a nugget of wisdom that comes from Housewives. And the tip that somebody said, and I couldn't tell you which franchise or who was, but they were talking about some text that came out about something that someone said. And they said, say it and forget it, write it and regret it. So it's a good tip for you guys as board members.
I like
when you put something in writing in any shape or form, keep in mind at some point in time, someone may be able to see it and may be able to read that. So you want to be very careful whenever we're drafting emails, whenever we're sending texts, whenever we're on WhatsApp chats, whenever we're posting on Facebook, be very mindful of what you're putting in writing. So that's my Housewives knowledge for you today.
Those are some great takeaways there. You're just like my wife with the Housewives.
I mean, it's addictive. You can't help it.
Excellent. Well, appreciate that, Emily. It's always a pleasure to have you on. For myself, I would say, again, what we've been talking about the entire webinar is just, understand that you're the leader of the community. You were placed in this position. You didn't just move in there. You were voted in, most likely. So you have to make difficult decisions, and some of those decisions are how are you going to communicate. But whatever you're doing is make sure you're doing it in a transparent manner, provide the information that's necessary. As Emily mentioned, now condos soon will have 25. So pretty much every condo is going to have a website. If you're an HOA, I would say even if you're less than 150 units, get a website. It's not going to hurt you. The cost is very minimal. That way that transparency exists. And if residents need information, they can easily capture that information or obtain that information, I should say. And that way reduces the workload from your staff or from your portfolio manager. And lastly, as I mentioned about Stephen Covey, just, first seek to listen, first seek to understand. Okay, so just, if they're complaining about something, empathize with it. And then if you can do something, let them know what you're going to do. Make sure you hit those expectations. But if you can't, be clear that that's not something that's of a high priority at the moment. And unfortunately, we'll set that comment down, but we'll address it in the near future. So it's important to have a vision. We talk a lot about that here at Affinity. So if you have a vision, you have your goals, let the community know of those goals. That way, if there's other projects that are being brought in, we could then, which one do we prioritize? Do we do this one or do we do this one? Because we can't do them all at the same time. So outside of that, the video will be up on our YouTube channel within the next 24 to 48 hours. So if you want to share with any board member or your manager, feel free to do so. If you want to reach us, you can reach us at info@managedbyaffinity.com. Again, thank you, Emily. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you to your team. Thank you, Dulce, on my team, for helping put this together.
Yes, thank you, guys.
We appreciate all of you that attended. Remember, you're leaders of your community, so stay positive and stay strong. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Rafael. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.